Dear friends and colleagues, peace be upon you. We have another interesting session. We have a very special guest with us. We are going to be talking about an important topic that will be touching to all the leadership and future leaders in the United States and all over the world. The topic is socio-political advocacy and building interfaith alliance. The guest, I'm going to go ahead and give it to the speaker, Dr. Imran Ahmed, to go ahead introduce himself. Dr. Imran Ahmed, please go ahead introduce yourself in terms of providing your background, personal, educational, and professional. How are you qualified to speak in socio-political advocacy and building interfaith alliance in this topic? Please go ahead.
Dr. Rashid, thank you for honoring me with this invitation and the opportunity to speak to this topic. This topic is of paramount importance to American Muslims in this day and age, and it is the socio-political advocacy in building interfaith alliance. This topic is something that I didn't choose. Actually, it chose me, and it chose all of us, because this is a very important topic as Muslims in this time. And over the years, as you know, notably after 9/11, the socio-political advocacy in building interfaith alliance has emerged as an urgent need, perhaps an existential need for the Muslim community in America. And what has driven this is the pervasive Islamophobia. And if this Islamophobia, the fear of Islam and Muslims, is left unchecked, it hurts us, but most importantly, it threatens our children and our future generations. So we have to wake up and take concrete actions. And we cannot do this alone. So we have to create alliances. And the objective of today's presentation, today's discussion, is to see how can we go about creating these alliances, how can we mobilize internally and externally. So as for my personal history, my family is from Bangladesh. I'm from Bangladesh. I came here as a child. Mom and dad were both academicians. They came to the US to do their doctoral studies. So I and my two sisters tagged along with them, as children do. This was almost half a century ago, so you can guess my age. I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I attended the University of Michigan, where I received a bachelor's degree to become a pharmacist. Now, after I got my pharmacy degree, I didn't like practicing pharmacy, so I went back to graduate school. I went to Lawrence, Kansas to do my higher education, where I got my master's and PhD in pharmaceutical chemistry. And after that, I did a short stint in academia as an assistant professor and a lecturer at the University of Louisiana in Monroe, Louisiana. And then after that, from all the time till now, I've been in the pharmaceutical industry doing research and development work, really focused on inventing and developing new medicines. So along the way, I got, as most of us do, I got married to my righteous wife, Maliha. I have two children, Tasnia, my daughter, and Tashrik, my son. And Alhamdulillah for blessing me and my family with Islam and being in the community of Muslims. So regards to the relevance of this topic, I think this is a very legitimate question you ask. So what is my qualification? Now, after all, a pharmaceutical chemist has nothing to do with political or socio-political advocacy or building interfaith alliance. So actually, it's very interesting that the passion for socio-political advocacy is really ingrained in me. My parents are both political scientists, and I remember sitting in dinner tables and listening to them debate about what I never understood what they were debating about, but it is something that has stuck with me. Now, that I put aside as I did my education in chemistry, in pharmaceutical chemistry. I never thought about it. And in fact, like most immigrants and children of immigrants, in my early life, I really focused on assimilating to the American society. I tried to be as not different than anybody else. Of course, I grew up in a Muslim family, so I would pray and I would do the requirements of Islam, the 5 pillars. But it wasn't with a great deal of awareness of Islam. It was a cultural Islam. And my real Islamic indoctrination, if you want to call it, really understanding of Islam happened late during my um, undergraduate work, where in my last year of my undergraduate, I actually lived in a masjid. In Ann Arbor, Michigan, there was a Muslim students' dorm. International students from all Muslim countries lived in that dorm. And I lived in that dorm with them. And that is when I really, really honestly, not from my family, but from my peers, from my colleagues, from my fellow students, that I really learned Islam with some great teachers who were at that time in Ann Arbor. Some of them are some of the real known people in the Muslim community in now. So what I really appreciated is, and reason why I feel that I am, my qualification is experiential. It is based on my experience. It's not that I was educated as an advocacy expert. I'm not a social scientist, but my experience is based on my association with the MSA at that time, the Muslim Student Association, then and subsequently with the Council of American Islamic Relations, and serving in various masjid committees, either in the Shura or in the Dawah committee. As you know, when I was in Texas, I was the chairperson of the Dawah committee at the IATC. And it really comes from an understanding that when you think about education, and we think of education is about learning, actually education is about learning how to learn. And so the education that I got in chemistry, although that seems very, very disassociated or different than the type of education you need for advocacy, the ability, for example, to lead people as you're leading organizations and departments, which I was doing, lead teams, motivate people so they follow your advice, your directions, and your suggestions. That is the leadership that you need for advocacy. And to make it short, really my experience with advocacy comes from the engagement I was kind of forced to have as part of the masjid at that time in Connecticut, and with CARE for after 9/11, when things have really had deteriorated to the point where Islamophobia was first time I became aware of it as really an issue that we need to deal with. And I found Muslims to be very detached. They were not connected with the reality of the times, and they were caught very unprepared because we were living in a cocoon, mostly the immigrant Muslims. We came to America, we felt that we had actually made it. We got the American life, and we tried to live in a cocoon totally dissociated with the realities of civil rights in this country itself. We would never try to find out the struggles of the African Americans, of the Native Americans. We were saying that, hey, we are just like the white people, the people of privilege in this country. And when 9/11 happened, it was made very clear to us very quickly that no, we are not. We are Muslims. And no matter whether we're white, black, yellow, green, we will always be considered different. And that is when I realized the necessity of socio-political advocacy and to really build alliances, not just within the Muslim community, but across the faith communities, that we can speak to justice and to respect each other and draw on each other for strength.
Oh, that is fantastic. 5 decades or more years of experiences and leaderships in different type of organizations. I believe you do have some very important scenarios and case studies and other data for us, which we will be benefited. So going, following the second questions that comes in mind, how do you define socio-political advocacy, and how does it dovetail with building interfaith alliances, and why it is important? I felt you already touch based why it is important. So if you can define socio-political advocacy, please.
Okay, thank you on that question. So advocacy, the word advocacy is an activity. It really is an activity can be done with an individual or a group. And the aim of that activity is to influence decisions within the political, economic, or social institutions. So socio-political advocacy then by definition would be an activity meant to influence. And an advocate is someone who provides advocacy support to people who need it. So when you are in the strictest sense, advocacy is something you do for somebody. So for example, if there is a minority community and say they're Muslims, not every Muslim is able to be an advocate. They may not have the knowledge, they may not have the background, the education to speak with conviction, with confidence, and with facts. So an advocacy is then the activity where an individual or a group of individuals aims to influence. Now, so they're speaking on behalf or in support of another person, place, or thing. So an example of an advocacy would be, for example, a nonprofit organization. Now, a 501c3 type of organization, be it a masjid or CARE or ACLU. These are all advocacy groups, and these work to help the people who need it. Now, it could be the minority groups, minority, African Americans, like in NAACP, or it could be the people whose rights have been abused, or in the case of CARE, it is Muslims. And why do you need advocacy? Because the people who are being impacted by these pressures, be it Islamophobia, bigotry, racism, they themselves may be at times too afraid to speak for themselves, or they may be unprepared to support themselves. So you need somebody to advocate for them. So it includes a lot of when you say activities. Activities could be, uh, speaking with people, speaking with politicians, speaking at public forums, media. It could be public policy. It could be laws and budgets. It could, but the key issue is that you're using facts and relationships. You're making connections. So what is happening to Muslims right now is nothing new. Yes, it has, perhaps it's new to Muslims, but it is nothing new in America. If you think about what happened to the Native Americans, there were at 1.40 million Native Americans in this country. How many do we have now? What happened to them? We brought over 40 million African Americans here in slavery. So the struggles that happen, we are going through, we think we are unique. Before us, every immigrant group went through it. The Jews went through it. The Irish went through it. The Italians went through it. The Africans went through it. So it is really bringing to focus during advocacy is that the general pattern of disenfranchisement and bigotry and racism and how it's impacting people. So and advocacy is a grassroots activity. It's done, but its target is really at the very top. So who are the people who make laws and policies in this country? It's not you and I. These are the politicians. These are the legislations. That's why it's so important to vote. And there was a time when Muslims would hardly ever vote. In fact, some Muslims said voting is haram. So this goes really against advocacy. If you think about the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was an advocate. What did he advocate for? Islam. What is dawah? Dawah is advocacy. So advocacy is just a secular term, what the Muslims call dawah. Yeah, it is not constrained to Islam only, because Islam is not constrained to religion only. Islam is a way of life. So social advocacy is then why social advocacy or political advocacy? Why? And look at what happened during the Islamic history, during the time that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in Mecca. Those were difficult years, the first 12 years of his prophethood. If you see how the pattern of advocacy developed in the Sunnah of the Prophet. I mean, he didn't first of all go and beat the drum and declare I'm a Muslim and come to Islam. The first advocacy started very grassroots, very quietly, talking to people who you trusted and really could reach out to, and slowly it expanded. So really, advocacy is a means of impacting change. And that's a key word, change. You're changing something. You're changing something that is not right, that needs to change in the right direction. So the Prophet Muhammad was changing the entire society. He wasn't just changing what people believed in. He was changing how they lived. And probably the reason why he got so much pushback, so much resistance, was not so much that what he was talking in terms of religion, because the Quraysh was from his own family, but it was that he was affecting change at a very fundamental level. And that is why social justice through political engagement is the idea that there is value in the society as a whole, and the society defends and upholds the rights of people and community. So we owe, as Muslims, not just to ourselves, we owe our responsibility to every person. Our neighbors have a right on us. Our children have a right on us. Yes, definitely people outside this country have a right on us. The Palestinians, the Kashmiris, they have a right on us. So really it is that collective responsibility that people have to do good and justice. And as Muslims, when we become good advocates, we shouldn't just advocate for ourselves. In fact, CARE, Council of American Islamic Relations, never say only Muslims come to us. We never say that. We said anybody who needs help come to us. And that is the essence of advocacy, is to be open-minded, to be inclusive, and to be balanced in how you talk to people. And really, it is really being fair across society, and it is also important to safeguard the safety of people. So if somebody comes to you, you do not take advantage of their weakness. You actually commit to helping them. So why is it important? It is important that if we try to change things as Muslims and recognize Muslims are less than 1.5% of the population of this country, we do not have critical mass. Now it is at the Pew Research says that by 2040, 2050, we will have a substantial percentage of the population, but we have to get there. And as you can see, there's a lot of pressure for us to prevent us from growing as a community in this country.
Thank you very much. That's a holistic review from different ethnics and background, and I believe it does make sense to the audience to understand the topic. And because of the time, we would need to jump to the next question, which is very important in terms of Muslim communities in America. So what do you see as some of the emerging challenges for Muslims in America in context of the current political environment? What are the opportunities and threats, and how can we as Muslims mitigate those challenges and threats?
That's a very good question, and it's a very timely question. As you can see, in the 20s, in the current political environment of what's known as populism, populism is based very much on pointing to somebody to blame. So, who are the people who have been blamed as of late? Muslims, definitely in 2016. In the Muslim ban, for example, the Hispanics, the African Americans. So anybody who is different. Now, different from whom? Different from people who have the power. So advocacy, therefore, in this political climate of combating, of resisting this populism, basically populism is the politics of hate. And Muslims are very easy to hate. I mean, for many reasons. One is we are bound by our principles. We carry ourselves differently. Even in your professional life, there are a lot of Muslims who feel like they cannot rise to the top because they do not do many of the things that quote unquote is needed in society to rise to the top. For example, you don't go and have a drink with your buddies in the bar. Now, a lot of the business in this country is done in the bar. A lot of business in this country and decisions are made in the golf course. They're made under frivolous social gatherings that most Muslims, practicing Muslims, will not allow themselves to indulge in. So when somebody looks at that, a practicing Muslim stands out like a sore thumb, to be honest. And it is for that reason that advocacy is trying to explain who we are and why we are who we are. Why is that we pray? Why do we fast? Why do we not do certain things? Why don't we drink? Why don't we eat pork? These are kind of things that need to be explained to people in a positive way. And the best way to explain it to people is what I call a win-win. That is, we don't do it because we're somehow superstitious, or we just do it because we don't understand. We do it, but we don't understand why we're doing it. There's a very good reason why we do it. There is benefit in it. There is secular benefit in it, and of course, as a Muslim, there is religious benefit in it. A secular person may not be that enamored by saying you'll go to heaven. So they say, well, why do I care? But for us, it's very important. So right now, the issue that, to answer your question in short, why is it important right now is exactly the environment we are in. Now, we're still in that environment. January 20 hasn't come on us, and hopefully it will come very soon. And it will come, and that doesn't mean we're off the hook. If it happened once, it can happen again. It probably will happen again. And in fact, it's good that it happened, because we were sleeping. We were all in slumber. We woke up. Quite honestly, until recently, I thought most of Americans, most of people do not think like that. Remember, based on what the last election, this election showed, yes, over 70 million people voted for exactly this. That's a scary proposition. So you can see why advocacy is important. I mean, 70 million people is not a minority, and we cannot go at it alone. And that is what frustrates many Muslims, and it frustrates me, is that Muslims are very insular. We are Muslims, so we close the door to others. We do not reach out to African Americans, to Hispanics, to other alliances who are also people who are being persecuted, who are people who are being, have racism, facing racism. But we tend to think that we can go at it alone. So the purpose of creating alliances, interfaith alliances, or the community of the faith community coming together is really to build these coalitions that can actually address these issues with a sense of power. And as you can see now in the Congress, for the first time, there are several Muslims. And at local and state levels, there are many Muslims coming together. I mean, Muslims always want to be doctors and lawyers. That's how we grew up, right? You know, if you're not a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, you have failed in life. But right now, as Muslims, we need to become politicians. We need to be social advocates. We need to be media people. And we need to start getting out of our cocoon, out of our comfort zone, and be part of the society where we can influence decisions. Now, doctor, lawyer, and engineer, they live in their own space. They're not influencing policy. So we need to value other parts of our society and of our education that allows us to make influence and change.
Yep, thank you. That is very interesting and valuable advice you have given for our audience. And I believe you did touch base some of the careeristic, terms. How about in terms of the skill sets, behaviors, and training needed in this, time for Muslims to be successful in these different types of endeavors, they're going to be engaging in?
That's a very important thing. So the skill set has to be individual. I mean, the approach should be a group approach. I mean, advocacy by definition is something that is based on people coming together. But the skill set that you need first is leadership. You need leadership. Now, what does leadership mean? And I look at leadership, and again, in the Islamic concept of leadership, leadership falls in three categories. One is subject matter leadership. So if you are going to be an advocate, go for advocacy, and it could be social advocacy, which is society driven, could be political advocacy, it could be health advocacy, healthcare. You have to educate yourself. So it's a technical knowledge or the knowledge of the subject matter. Now, that's first thing that you need, that Muslims, the skill set you need. That's the basis. But then that is not enough. I mean, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. You need to be a people leader. And a people leader is somebody who can communicate, and influence people. So if you speak, people take you seriously. And the way the Islamic principle of being a good people leader is to be compassionate, be an active listener. You cannot be selfish. And actually, from a secular point of view, one of the definitions I really like about people leadership, or leadership as defined by one of the presidents of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower, in the 50s. He said, leadership is the art of influencing someone to do something that you want to do because he wants to do it. So that's very important, because basically you cannot do everything, but you have to win through people. So that's the people leadership. And that's a skill that is very, very underdeveloped skill in most people, and Muslims in particular, because we tend to be very, very introverted, very within ourselves. We are very good individual contributors, but we are not very good at leading with people. And the last one, and also very, very important, is what I call enterprise leadership, which is being able to see the big picture, being able to understand the business impact, quote unquote, I mean, not making profit, but the impact, the larger impact of what you're doing. So what is the strategy? If you're doing something, there's a tactic of doing it, but there is an intention of why you're doing it and what the outcome should be. So really understanding the big picture, or what some people call connecting the dots. So you take an action, you take another action, but how do these actions come together? And how do they come together in a convergent way that would impact change? So essentially the skill set, the essential skill set for advocacy, of impacting change, of influencing decisions and policy, is to be able to lead, and its leadership has those three categories in my mind, and they need to be all developed. Not everybody can develop all three, and therefore you need a diverse team, because you pick somebody who's a very good leader, people leader, with a very good technical leader and a very good enterprise leader, and you just have to put them together in a synergistic way. And that's what a high performance team is defined as.
Thank you very much. That's very, very informative and beneficial advice and knowledge for us to know. And I wish, we had enough time to continue our conversation even longer. However, we did reach at the end of our time. And we thank you, Dr. Imran Ahmed, for your time and your sharing of your expertise and knowledge with our audience. And may God Almighty bless you, your family, and continue lead you, give you the opportunity to lead whatever you are endeavoring locally and internationally. God bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.